This is Beyond Strides, the science and culture of human movement. I'm Andi, and I want to empower you through knowledge and challenge your own thinking. Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond Strides. Today's topic is strength training for runners. I think this is a huge topic, and I'm pretty sure this is going to be only part one of many parts about this topic. But a couple of days ago, I asked on Instagram about questions and things you want to know. And I got a fair share of questions, and I really wanted to use this podcast to answer all of them and give you maybe just a basic framework on how a good strength training program for runners should look like, what you should look out for, what you shouldn't do, and just bust maybe even some myths about strength training for runners. And I want to tell you a little story on when I realized why strength training is so freaking important. I've been invited to run the Speed Project as a relay. So for those who don't know, the Speed Project is like a race from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. You can either run it solo, so the real crazy people do that. However, you can also run it as a relay, so 6 or even more people basically just run until Vegas. Not everyone runs at once, but there's always one runner, and then the rest of the team basically coming after the runner with a van, and then you switch and so on. And the funny thing is, I got invited by some friends because there were one female runner short after having long COVID for more than half a year. I was feeling really down. I couldn't train for half a year other than just doing aqua jogging with the grandmas and like biking a little bit. And however, long COVID went away, and it was October 2021 or 22, I don't know. And then the race was in March the next year. So I thought, okay, perfect. You got to have 5 months to prepare. You have to run in total 70 to 80 kilometers. This is fine. You'll crush it. Then one thing came after the other, and I got sick multiple times with like influenza and flu and stuff like this. And I was basically sick for 2.5 or 3 months. And so my final preparation time was maybe 2.5 months or 2 months for quite a big race. I never ran so many kilometers within 48 hours. And so I started to train for it. I was strength training also with it. And I told all my team members, hey, I'm pretty confident I can do 40, 50 kilometers during the weekend. It might be that you guys have to take over my mileage because I'm just not trained enough to do that. However, this was fine because we had some really seriously good runners on the team. We had runners who are regularly clocking like 80, 100 kilometers per week. So really strong runners, really fast runners as well. And so it was quite a nice thing. We actually ran it. I also ran maybe 60, 65 kilometers or 70, I don't know. And however, after the race, everyone except me and another guy was injured. And all these people in my team were really good runners. As I said, they were running a lot, and all their knees blew up because just running so much mileage within 48 hours is still crazy on the body. However, I saw a pattern there because me and the other guy, we were the only ones doing regularly strength training, and not only just going to the gym here and there, but really 2 to 3 times per week. We had quite some muscle mass as well, and we were fine. We had a little bit of DOMS and sore muscles for a few days, and then obviously we were tired for a week, but we didn't have anything major, whereas the other ones had knee and ankle issues for months after that race. And so this was the first time when I was like, maybe strength training is quite important for running and plays a huge role in lowering the risk of injury. And the second story I want to tell is now a friend and a client of mine, Juju, who ran the same race but solo. It was a crazy endeavor, and I'm sure I might even have a conversation with her on this podcast about that, so I don't want to talk about too much about it. But I told her, you have to do strength training. You have to go to the gym 2 to 3 times a week. You have to lift heavy and get really stronger in the preparation for this race. And she did that, and she listened to everything I said. And she also texted me after the race that she, from all the people who were running solo with her, she was the only one who was not injured after the race. And so what I want to say with this, strength training is not just a thing people talk about. It's important for runners, but strength training actually creates huge capacity for you to be able to tolerate the load of running. Because if you're long distance, also mid-distance running, usually the load on the muscles are quite huge. For example, in long distance running alone, the soleus one of the calf muscles have to take more than 7 times your body weight. But however, if you run relatively slow, you would not feel like the load is super, super heavy. But if you do strength training and you develop resilience and resistance against high loads, because you squat very heavy, you move weight very heavy, you do proper plyometrics where you jump, then you will create a great capacity for your body to be able to deal with these repeated running forces. Because if you go out on a run and let's say you do 170 steps a minute, which is your cadence, and you go out just for a 10-minute run, you already have 1,700 steps. And so if you multiply this by how much you're running, you will just see how much impact you have. And yes, I just hope that this story kind of helps you to understand why strength training is so important for runners. And every person I'm coaching, every runner, every cyclist, every triathlete, I am handing them a strength training program. And I really put emphasis on them getting stronger, because this will not only make them faster as a runner, but also just more resilient and resistant to all these strains and forces. And in the end, it will just lower the risk of injury. Obviously, you can't fully prevent injuries because things just happen, and you can also have the best training program and the best volume management, and you might still get injured because things happen in life. However, we can lower the risk of this injury. And I think strength training, plyometrics, isometric training is maybe next to volume management, the best tool to do that. So let's go to the questions. And I want to start with a question. Hey, Andi, how do you currently train? This is a good question. Might put me into a little existential crisis, because due to my master's and the gym opening, I put my own training in the relative back of my needs, because I had so many things to do and I was just training and running whenever I had time to. And sometimes this was 5 times a week. Sometimes it was 1 or 2 times per week. However, I am slowly back to a rhythm. Within the last weeks, I've been training a bit wild, because I was just developing a strength training for runners program. And so I was really doing the sessions for the program to see what works, what doesn't work, also within a track session. So the last week were kind of experimental and more workout based, I would say. So every session was a bit different, because I was just like trying things out and finding a good rhythm for this program. However, I train currently 2 to 3 times in the gym a week. I'm aiming for that. And I'm running 3 to 4 times. Sometimes I'm switching one run with a bike ride. I'm sure now in summer I'll be cycling a bit more, maybe running a bit less, or doing everything a bit more. It really depends on also my time and capacity. However, I really try to make strength training the same priority as running. I mean, I'm a runner, but I do a lot of strength training. And you might call me a hybrid athlete. Honestly, I don't want to admit that, but in the end, I'm a hybrid athlete. And I hate the word hybrid athlete, because for me, the word pictures just like these hybrid athlete bros who train topless and just talk about their morning routine. And I don't want to be put into the same image as that. However, I think the key to a very healthy and holistic lifestyle, and just to be a better mover, to feel more healthy, to have less pain, is to do consistently strength training and cardio training. And the cardio training can be everything. Doesn't have to be running. If you hate running, you don't have to run by all means. But I think those are the most important components to a good and healthy training system. And so my 2 to 3 strength sessions per week consist now actually of 1 lower body day, 1 full body day, and 1 upper body day, because I just rotate them depending on how I feel. So for example, if I had a big bike ride or a heavy, long, high volume track session, my legs might feel a bit tired. So sometimes I feel like, okay, now a full leg day, I don't want to do that. So I do just a full body or upper body strength training day. So however, I really try to move throughout the week in every plane. So I move forward and backwards. I move sideways. I rotate. I do plyometrics, jumps. I do them not only once a week, but actually 3 to 4 times a week, because in jumping, the forces that are applied and the forces your body has to deal with are pretty big and pretty huge. And also jumping is a big coordination thing. So your body and your muscles, your neurons really have to coordinate, to anticipate the ground, to contract at the right time. And in order to train this, you just have to do this more often than once a week. However, the volume is relatively low. So instead of doing one big ass jumping session a week, which will make your shins and your feet feel sore for days, rather just spread it out on multiple days, and you will expose yourself just more often to the jumps. Every strength session of mine also contains isometrics, really heavy isometrics. Isometric is an exercise where you basically just hold a certain position and you don't move. And isometrics, first, obviously, are really good for overall strength, but you also will learn to co-contract. So, for example, in certain positions, your calves and your hamstring have to contract together and to coordinate together and hold a certain position. And plus, isometrics are one of the best things you can do for your tendon health. Just to go a bit deeper into that, I might even do an own episode on, because if you hold a certain position for longer, your tendon is going to start to creep. This is due to how the collagen fibers are structured within the tendon. And this means that if you have a certain constant stress, and a constant stress is applied if you just don't change the position. So if you, for example, do a wall sit and you just sit on the wall for several seconds to minutes, the tendon will slowly get longer and longer and longer. And there are certain mechanisms which will make the tendon stronger after doing, for example, isometrics. However, you do have to do them very often and for very long, because tendons respond very, very slowly to such things. If you are more interested into tendon stuff, I can highly recommend Jake Tura. He's basically the tendon guy, and I think he also has a podcast, and he posts about this. And so if you want to learn more about that, go to his Instagram, listen to his podcast. It's really good. So yes, this is how I currently train. I do strength training. I do runs. On my runs, I do a longer easy run, a shorter easy run, and then I do 2 types of intervals. One times very intensive intervals, so very short intervals, but very, very fast, so higher paces than I would ever run in any race. And extensive intervals, which is more like tempo work. And to be honest, I also kind of count the intensive track session. I do this on track. You can do this wherever you want, but I kind of count the intensive interval session as a runner's strength session, because you just learn to apply very, very high forces into the ground. I do plyometrics. I do strides, and then I do sub-maximal sprinting. I wouldn't call it sprinting because I'm not a sprinter. I don't even know how to sprint, to be honest. I'm a mid-distance, long-distance runner. And real sprinting is way different. But in the long-distance, mid-distance running world, you could call this sprinting. And so while doing these very, very fast runs, your body has to learn to deal with very high loads, because the faster you run, the higher the load is on the body. And by dealing with these really high loads, you again get more resilient and resistant to higher loads. And also here, you really reduce your injury risk, especially to overuse injuries. And for example, I've always had a bit of an issue with my inner side of my shin. People thought it's shin splints. However, there is no such thing as shin splints. People thought it's a bone stress injury. However, it never has been a bone stress injury, but it was really the tendon of my tibialis posterior. And so it was like the beginning of the tendon, then the muscle, who were just really painful with every step I took. And then last year, I really ran consistently every week, week after week, really intensive intervals. And the first 2 or 3 weeks, I felt like my shin is going to explode. But then suddenly it really settled, and since then, I have never, ever had that pain again, because running these really high loads will just make you way stronger. And that's why I think actually a runner's strength session can also be done on track, and should be done on track, because you really have to put as much force as you can into each step. So it's kind of like strength training, because instead of just running and think, okay, I'm going to run fast, I actually think with every step I do, for example, if I do fast 200 meters, I think with every step I do, I think push, push, push. And it really comes down to like a strength endurance training, I would say. The next question was like, hey, why are planks and bodyweight exercises not enough? And whereas I understand where it comes from, because planks, bodyweight exercises, things you don't need equipment for, is something you can do at home and is maybe a bit more convenient than going to the gym. Most of the bodyweight exercises just don't have enough load. If you are a total beginner to strength training, you might do 6 air squats, so just 6 squats with your body weight, and you might feel a big burn because you have no developed strength whatsoever. And then body weights exercises are a good point to start with. But as you progress and as you get stronger, you need higher loads. And in strength training for runners, it does not make sense to do 20, 30, 40 reps of an exercise, because this is just high volume training. And you don't want high volume training in the gym, because as a runner, as a cyclist, you have high volume in your runs. You have tempo runs, you have intervals, maybe even hill runs or heavy rides, where you have a lot of volume because you do step after step after step with a lot of strength and force. And so just training even more volume in the gym will just make you really fatigued, will make you feel like shit the next day on your run. Your legs will be super heavy, but however, it won't necessarily make you stronger. And that's why bodyweight exercises are not really suitable for runners. However, if you manage to do a very heavy bodyweight isometric, for example, a single leg wall sit, or a very like a short stance split squat isometric, where you are in a short stance, you load only one leg. And I promise you, also the strongest people will start to shake on this one if you coach this correctly, because it's just a very heavy exercise. Those are bodyweight exercises that actually work for runners because they are heavy and hard enough. With planks, I have a little issue, because planks just teach your core to brace, and bracing is not the only function your core has, and bracing is not even the main function your core has. So your core are basically all the muscles that go around your torso, which in the end make your spine move into certain directions. So your spine can bend forward and backward, your spine can bend laterally, so to the sides, but your spine can also rotate. And in running and walking and everything you do, your spine is moving, your spine is not braced, and I hope you're not moving like a brick. And so doing planks only will teach your spine to be braced all the time, and will definitely not teach your spine to move. And many people I see who have, for example, back issues or neck issues, the underlying issue is that they have never taught their spine to move and to bend. And that's why I don't really like planks for runners. Again, if you're a really beginner and you don't have any strength and you don't know how to coordinate, sometimes these bracing things, which are basically also just core isometrics, can find a place and time in a training program, but they should not be the main thing. They are made by almost everyone who is doing running programs. And so the next question is, what equipment would you need, and do you need a gym? And I think I kind of answered this one. So I think a gym makes things just easier. Also, to be honest, I could never train at home because my couch is there and my bed is there, and somehow I train and I always end up on the couch. And so being in a gym just gives you really the headspace to work and to work out and to train. However, if you find exercises without weights that are hard enough, you can definitely go without gym. You can go outside. I mean, now the weather is getting better. You can also do jumps. And jumping is very high load, very high stress, and jumping can and is normally performed without weights. You can jump with weights, and they have a place and time, and they're really nice, but you can jump without weights. And so, for example, if you want to do a strength training session on a track and you don't have weights, or you want to do this at home, however, jumping really hard at home, usually most neighbors don't really like that. But if you have any space where you don't have weights, you can just do a lot of jumps, but not just like jumping a little bit around, but really on high intent. So you can, for example, jump for height. So jump as high as you can for a few jumps, or jump for distance, for length, forward, backward, in every direction, basically. And if you do a really good jumping training, that's already a really good lower body strength training. So you can definitely do strength training without equipment. If you don't want to go to the gym, don't have access to a gym, you can definitely either get just a few dumbbells, kettlebells for home, so you have some external weight, or you can get resistance bands. Resistance bands are obviously adding resistance. However, the resistance curve of resistance bands is not constant. So the longer you pull the band, the harder the exercise will get, which is not the case, for example, with a cable tower or with just external weight like a dumbbell. And so these are all factors you kind of have to put in. But in the end, if the decision is either train at home with resistance bands and a water bottle, or don't strength train at all, then always please choose the resistance bands, because every strength training is better than none. The next question was, which muscle should you train? So as a runner and as a human, I want you to train every muscle you have. However, to be honest, I'm not thinking about training muscles. The muscles will get trained eventually if you do certain movements, but my biggest goal is to move better. So I do certain movements and I look at the joints and think about, which movements should these joints be able to perform? And then I train them. So for example, for the knees, I do knee dominant things in every plane. So you can go for squats, you can go for walking lunges, but you can also go for side lunges, which is also adding a bit more of a hip dominant. You should learn to hinge very well. So to flex and extend your hip, your pelvis. You should learn to push and pull with your upper body in every angle. As I said before, you should learn to flex and extend your spine in every direction and also to rotate. And by learning all of these movement skills, you are already getting a really good training program with it. If you add jumping to it, because jumping is also just another movement, jumping can be performed more ankle dominant or more knee dominant and hip dominant, where you sink a bit lower into the jumps. You will also add another nuance. So instead of thinking, okay, I have to train my quads or I have to train this, rather think of which movements a human should be able to do. However, sometimes when I'm coaching people, especially in rehab, I have the goal to train certain muscles, because some people just have very weak X muscle, insert a name there, and you just really see, okay, this has to be trained. As I said, in runners, the soleus is taking up 7% of body weight. And so all your foot and calf muscle in running should be really strong. And you won't get this necessarily just by doing calf raises with body weight or just with a tiny dumbbell, but doing really heavy calf work. You can do overcoming isometrics, where you basically push into a calf raise as heavy as you can for a few seconds. You can hold longer isometrics. You can do really heavy calf raises with external weight, but a lot of weight, not only like two kilos. And also you can train the calf to contract together with the quad. So for example, if you do a pistol squat or a squat with a very deep knee bending, your calf has to contract in the deepest position together with your quad, and you will really feel it. You will really feel that your calf and your quad are working together. And so I would say pistol squats are actually a really good exercise for runners, because you train your quads, you train your calves, and you train to co-contract both muscles in a certain position together. The next question was if you should mimic running in the gym. And I'm not sure if I understood the question right, but I think this person wants to know if they should do running related movements in the gym to make them stronger for running. And I think there is a big difference between sport specific strength training and holistic or overall strength training. And last question for today, because I actually have a track session coming up and I have to leave in a few minutes, is how to structure the strength training. So how often should I strength train? How should I combine it with runs? And also how many sets and reps should I do? And so I think most of the runners, if you do 2 to 3 times per week strength training, that's perfect. Usually I do 2 times per week strength training with most of the runners I coach. However, as we go into race preparation, into the final weeks, like the final 6 weeks of race prep, a bit longer, less, depends on the person, I like to spread the strength sessions out into 3 times per week, but way less volume, way less reps, less sets, just to have a momentum of carrying really heavy load. In terms for sets and reps, you have to differentiate between a beginner in the gym where the biggest goal first is just to learn how to move, to learn the movements, who don't necessarily want to train super, super heavy yet, because they just don't really know how to train yet. Those people need to do a lot of reps, but with less weight, because the more you do a certain movement, the better you will get in that certain movement. So if you have never done certain exercises, instead of doing 2 times 5 or 3 times 5, maybe do 3 or even 4 times 12, but with really low weight just to learn the movement first. After a few weeks or months, depending on your level, when you got the hang out of it, I would say every runner should do maximum 2 to maybe 3 working sets per exercise. I usually like to program 2 because that's enough. And sometimes you have a really good run and a really good run, not pun not intended, a really good gym session, and you really feel strong and you really want to do another set of heavy squats because they just feel good, then definitely go for it. But to be honest, I think for everyone, 2 working sets. A working set is basically a set with the highest weight you can currently tolerate, or like with your end weight for that session, is totally enough. However, you can definitely do warm-up and ramp-up sets before. Again, not too much. If you do like 4 warm-up and ramp-up sets, you will again add a lot of volume to your training, which you don't want because you have your volume in the running. But I think 1 or 2 warm-up sets with way less weight are actually pretty good just to warm up, to get hang of the movement, to remember, okay, this is what I have to do. And yes, so 2 to maximum 3 working sets. Repetition wise, I would say everything between 3 and 6, depending on the exercise, on the timing where you're in a training program. But as I said, you want to learn to move very heavy loads. And if you do 12 reps or 20 reps, you won't move heavy loads because you have to do the 20 reps. And so every runner, if you are confident in the gym, you know what to do, be brave, put on the weight, and start moving actual heavy loads. And how should I combine the strength training with the runs? This is also a very good question. And over the past months and years, I actually like to program for myself, but also my clients, strength and running on the same day. Because if you, for example, if you're running 3 to 4 times a week and you do strength training 2 to 3 times per week, if you add this up, it's already 7 sessions. And if you do 1 session each day, your nervous system does not really have chance to fully recover because there is a training session every day. And I found it with myself, but also with a lot of clients I have, that they recover way better when doing double sessions on one day, but then they have off the next day. And so what I like to do is to program strength training before the track sessions. Doesn't really matter if you do first strength training or track session in the afternoon or the other way around, or you do strength training and track session directly after each other. However, what really does matter is that you fuel enough. So never go hungry into a training session. Always have a snack before a training session. If you do double sessions without any break in between, then make sure to eat at least a banana between the sessions because you just really need the fuel. And one thing I've learned over the past months and years, also in my own training, is that actually we can handle a lot of volume and a lot of load if we are fueled. And it's insane because I had periods where I didn't really take care of my fueling so much. I never had an eating disorder or anything related, but I just didn't think about it. And I was always tired. I had always very heavy legs. And I asked myself, how is this? I'm not even training so much. Why do I have heavy legs? And then I started to eat enough carbs, especially before and after sessions. You need the carbs before the session because you need the fuel, but you also need the carbs after the session in order to recover better, because the faster you refill your glycogen stores, the better you will recover. And so now I can actually train hard almost every day. I'm not doing that, but I could, because I just have my nutrition and my volume management in a very, very good balance. And so how to combine it with runs? I love to do double session days, because also in the end, it's just more practical, because sometimes you will have days where you're working, where you have other things going on, maybe also doing some things with friends and nothing sportly related. And it's just giving you a lot of headspace in your week to know, okay, I have one double day, because if I'm out there training, I can also just stay an hour longer and do the other session as well. But the next day you have off and you can recover, you can eat, you can sleep, you can meet your friends and have a good life. And to sum it up, strength training for runners should include plyometrics at least 2 to 3 times per week. Jumps where you jump for height, for distance, on one leg, both legs in every direction. Should include heavy sets of knee, hip dominant movements. You should work on your calf and hamstring muscles, especially as runners. But to be honest, I think every person should work on their calf and hamstring muscles. And definitely also on upper body and core. I know a lot of runners think like, okay, I don't need my upper body. I'm just running. I don't use my arms. Train your upper body. This will make you a stronger runner, I promise. And also just a stronger human. And we are not only consisting of legs or not only of arms. So just train the whole body, please. In terms of when to schedule your strength sessions with your runs, I like to do double days with intervals or an easy run. Scheduling a strength session and a long run on the same day rarely goes well. Your nutrition has to be really on point on that, and you really have to have a strong training base. So maybe don't do that. But in the end, it's about volume management. So a long run is very high volume, and just doing another strength session on top of it is just too much. However, an intensive track session or an interval session is usually a bit less volume, and so you can add a strength session to that. You should do heavy isometrics in order to keep your tendons healthy, because we know every runner has some sort of tendon issues, because just by the overusing nature of the sport and by the amount of contacts you have when you go and run. So keep your tendons strong, keep your muscles strong, keep your bones strong, and you will become a stronger, faster, and definitely more resilient runner. Think about the story from the Speed Project. As I said, everyone blew up except of the people who did strength training. So that's about it today. Thanks for tuning in. If you have questions about this episode or other questions about strength training for runners or anything else, really, message me. I'm pretty sure this is not going to be the only episode about strength training for endurance athletes. Also, if you want to learn more about strength training, how to program, as I said, I've been working on an endurance athletes training program. It's a monthly subscription. So basically you subscribe and then you get each month a new training program. The program consists of 2 strength trainings in the gym and 1 strength training on the track with running drills, plyometrics, very high paces of running. And you can just see how a good program is programmed there. You can train it and become actually a better and stronger and more resilient runner. And also we have like a little forum where I post bits and pieces of coaching knowledge and cues and some deeper things about the training. So make sure to check it out as well. And if you like the podcast, I would love for you to share it, because the more people that listen to this podcast, the more time I will be able to dedicate to it, and also the more interesting podcast guests I will be able to get. So if you liked it, share it, put it on your socials, tag me with it, and I'll reshare it. And thanks for tuning in, and you will hear me on the next episode of Beyond Strides. Bye-bye!